of February. For those that haven't attended our planning committee before, I'll just go through procedure very briefly. As the chair, I introduce the application, ask you if you've seen any site visit videos. I then ask the planning officer to present his report, giving us any updates, any changes to the recommendations. We then have a slot for public speaking, 5 minutes for objectors, 5 minutes for a local member, parish councillor, county councillor, and then 5 minutes for a supporter. The members of the committee can then ask questions to the planning officer, and then we begin the debate, asking for a proposal, ask that proposal to be seconded, then we debate the issue and take a vote. Have there been any apologies for absence today?
No, Chair, everybody's present.
Everybody's present, very good. The minutes of the previous meetings, the one held on Tuesday, the 6th of December, have been circulated. Are members happy that these are a true record? They are. Councillor Reid, you've got a query?
Well, yeah, on page 13,
13.
It's got my name spelt wrong. I don't particularly mind that, but I don't know whether if someone could take us to court and say that guy's not a councillor, so it's R-E-E-D in the papers, and it's obviously R-A-I-D.
We'll make sure that's put right for you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's Jeff with a J, just to be awkward.
No problem. So, members, happy with these minutes? Move them as a true record? Thank you. Any members of the planning committee got any disclosures that they wish to declare today? Yes.
I'm on the board of Northumberland FA, so I'm going to just depart and not take any part in the
Thank
decision.
you. Lyle?
Thank you, Chair. I'm the ward member for Pottingley East and Stanton, so I have been approached by applicant today. However, I haven't made it clear that I have an open mind on this, because I've also been approached by members for and against this application as well, so I think my time is better used in this chamber debating it.
Fine, sir. And Richard?
I'm a member of Ponteland Town Council. They have commented or whatever. I take no part in any of the planning processes of that, which means I'm free to see what I want here.
Excellent, thank you. So then we come to determination of planning applications. The agenda is quite light today, ladies and gentlemen, just with one item. So we'll move to item number 6 on the agenda, which is variation of condition 22. That relates to trees and hedgerows, and that's pursuant to the planning permission 17/03729/CCD to allow removal of trees subject to ecological reports and arboricultural assessments, and that's at Ponteland Leisure Centre, Callerton Road, Ponteland. So, without any further ado, I'd like to ask our planning officer, Ryan Soulsby, to present his case. Ryan, over to you, sir.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just as an update to members, 3 objections were received against the application following notification of the application going to Strategic Planning Committee, as well as a supporting statement from the applicant. A copy of these objections and statement have been distributed to members ahead of the committee. It may be appropriate for there to be a 5-minute pause ahead of the presentation to allow members to read in full. Yeah.
Yes, I think that'd probably be a good idea.
Yeah, no problem.
So, members, are we going to read those letters now? And when you've finished, we'll continue. Is that all right, Ryan?
Is it the same one that's online? Right.
I've got it here on mine as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, are we happy to proceed? Thank you. Ryan, over to you if you'd like to present your report, sir.
Yeah, so a variation is sought to a previously approved planning application at Ponteland Leisure Centre in Callerton Lane. The application proposes the removal of 12 trees from the application site. The application site is located within designated greenbelt land, but its proximity to the existing residential and commercial properties ensure it is viewed as within the settlement of Ponteland. The previous planning permission referred to within the application description gave consent for the demolition of the previous leisure centre and construction of a replacement building with a primary and secondary school. The application proposes the removal of 12 trees from the application site, which were protected as part of the tree retention plan upon the previous submission. The proposed removal is to facilitate a possible clubhouse development upon site. However, no permission is in place at this present time for this development, nor has an application been submitted to the local planning authority for assessment. These site photographs show the application site from the existing leisure centre and a closer view of the trees between the existing sport pitches. And these site photographs are from the Ecological Impact Assessment and BAT survey and show the trees during the summer months. The species of the 12 trees to be removed consist of 9 sycamore and 3 crack willow. The proposed replacement trees will be planted along the northern boundary of the leisure centre site. The application is recommended for refusal in line with the recommendation presented within the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We now come to the section for public speaking. We have 2 speakers this afternoon. Susan Johnson, speaking as a parish councillor, and we have also John Chappell, who is supportive of the application. Susan, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Ponteland Town Council support this application as the end result of a clubhouse for the 2 sports teams will provide an excellent amenity for them and therefore the Ponteland community. Both clubs were founded in the 1960s and have operated out of the leisure centre since then for 60 plus years, quite an achievement. The 2 clubs provide support for over 800 adults and children, male and female, in the community of Ponteland. None of this would be possible without the dedication of volunteers who give their support in all aspects of the club's life. The provision of a clubhouse for the teams will enable them to qualify for higher leagues, therefore attracting residents to remain with their local teams rather than travel to teams with better facilities and better prospects. It will ensure the continuity of our sporting provision in Ponteland. To quote from Policy QOP4, Landscaping and Trees of the Northumberland Local Plan, which requires no loss of trees except where this would be unavoidable, and 1, considerations in favour of the development would outweigh harm resulting from the loss of the trees. Also, the loss of the trees can be adequately mitigated through measures such as replacement planting where possible. We find it very disappointing to find that the committee recommend refusal of this application in the name of 12 very ordinary, immature, unprotected trees, when there was heartbreaking, widespread tree devastation to accommodate the new schools and leisure centre. A lot of valuable trees lost there, mature, valuable trees. To conclude, it will be a great shame for Ponteland, especially the youngsters, and also the large number of people who give their time voluntarily to provide the best opportunities for our community, if this application is refused. The greatest fear is for the survival of these clubs.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chappell, you also have an allocation of 5 minutes, sir. When you're ready, if you'd like
Thank
to
you. Thank you,
present.
Chair. I'm here as a representative of both Ponteland Rugby Club and Ponteland Football Club in a joint bid to develop a community facility in Ponteland. I welcome this opportunity to address the meeting and to outline what we hope to achieve by this process. I do hope that you've had the chance to read our submitted supporting document, and I will not repeat it to you, but will merely refer to the salient points. Over 12 months ago, we met with the planning officer on site who advised us that the process we needed to follow was 1, to obtain a community asset transfer of the land, 2, seek to alter the original planning permission regarding the trees on site, and then 3, submit a planning application. We are thankful that the Council have agreed to a community asset transfer of the land covering the tarmacked car park area of the old sports centre, subject to planning approval. This application for the removal of 12 trees is the next stage of our ultimate goal. In order to site a clubhouse which creates the logical location for both clubs, it would entail the removal of 12 of the 100 plus trees around the sports pitches. A full survey by ecologist Ruth Haddon concluded that the line of the 7 sycamore trees on the edge of the old car park were stunted and not healthy, whilst the remaining 5 were not indigenous trees. Her assessment was that overall a biodiversity gain would occur if native trees and shrubs were planted to replace the 12 trees. The council ecologist came to a different conclusion, and our attempts to have a site meeting to discuss the overall biodiversity impact was turned down by the planning officer. In order to maximise the biodiversity gain, we would be fully committed to enhance the planting on site and would, following the town council's support for our project, agree to a 2-to-1 replacement of the trees. In their support, the council indicated a 1-to-1 replacement. This application has also received massive public support, with 399 letters in support and 24 against. Following this submission, we have also had support and funding to provide 7 substantial native trees in a Queen Elizabeth copse on site to commemorate 7 decades of the Queen's reign, along with the offer to plant at least 50 more trees on a site near Ponteland. We would, of course, also be open to any other planting that would further develop and increase the biodiversity already planned. Should you agree to this application, we would be happy to have an attached condition that no trees would be removed until a successful planning application was in place. This offer has been rejected by the planning officer. In conclusion, I hope that we've reassured you that we are asking for the minimum amount of disruption, and we will ensure that our plans will improve the biodiversity on site. Both clubs have a proud history of playing sport and representing Ponteland. We are embedded in community life and take great pleasure in involving our players and supporters in the wider activities in the village/town. Please delete as appropriate. We consider this to be our home, and as custodians, we will do everything that we can to create a brilliant location and experience for all. With your support and public backing, we believe we have a scheme that will sit alongside and enhance the current excellent on-site facilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, it's now your opportunity to ask any questions you'd like to put forward to our planning officers. Georgina Hill.
Thank you, Chair. I have not yet learned the local plan off by heart, despite it being a great page turner. But could I just have clarity on what was referenced to earlier, that the part in the local plan about loss of trees, about it's like the old harm benefit argument. So can we say that because the benefit outweighs the harm of losing trees, we can support it? If you could just clarify what the local plan says about that equation.
Yeah, policy QOP4 of the Northumberland local plan relates to sort of landscaping and sort of trees. It says in sort of all instances the loss of trees should be sort of avoided, but then it outlines sort of where it may be an applicable sort of loss of trees if, like you say, there's overriding benefits or sort of biodiversity enhancements on site. I think what needs to be taken into consideration here is that this application is solely for the removal of trees. It doesn't include sort of the future clubhouse development, which may not come to fruition. So ultimately, what we would, if we were to recommend approval today, we would be permitting the loss of trees without sort of any significant biodiversity gain. We'd be losing sort of mature trees, and whilst there would be replanting included, they would ultimately be sort of saplings until sort of they're actually developed into mature trees, which wouldn't in turn be a biodiversity gain for protected species.
All right. Question from Lyle Darwin. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It actually follows on from what the planning officer just said. Just touching on that as well, we heard that the applicant is also willing to put on a condition that no tree should be felled or sought to cut down if and until such plan permission is granted. Can we put that condition on this if we were to go from this?
No, we would be unable to attach that condition because that condition would then wholly be dependent on a separate planning application and a separate development coming forward. So any planning condition would need to be relevant to sort of the main site rather than sort of another development which may or may not come to fruition. So we couldn't include a planning condition that would be dependent on another development.
So there's no reason for the club to take down or fell down any tree unless they were to have plan permission for that clubhouse. So they wouldn't be looking to take down any tree anyway, unless they got plan permission for the clubhouse. So really, this is the first hurdle that they need to get through. The actual main one is the plan permission for the clubhouse. So this is just, they need to get past this one first. Well, I understand we can't put a condition on it, but no tree shall be harmed, if you like, if and until they were to get plan permission for the clubhouse. And also, we did hear they would replace a 2-for-1 for every tree that's felled, the 12 trees that would be felled. But in addition to that, they are going to plant native species, which would increase the biodiversity net gain. And also they're going to plant a lot more trees than the 2-to-1 ratio in other sites around Pontyland and the surrounding area. So that would outweigh QOP4 as well, in that there would be a biodiversity net gain on site as well if we were to grant this application. Would that be right? Yeah. Thanks.
Question from Julie Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's partially what's just been mentioned. Paragraph 7.12. I'm not going to read it out, but it's basically saying that because the application, it's not linked to any development in the area, and if we were to permit removal of the trees, the tree work could be undertaken without a future application being successful or coming to fruition. And as just said, we couldn't add an additional condition upon this permission. So we've heard that the applicant was told to look at a community asset transfer, then to look at a variation of the planning conditions, then to go for planning permission. But why, if we knew that we wouldn't be able to put a condition on and it wouldn't prevent any work being done between now and the approval of a planning application further down the line, why did we suggest this? Should it not have gone straight to a full planning application? And also, could we not do more of a minded to approve or something like that to cover us so that no work can be taken without the need to put a condition in, so that it's protected? So should that application come forward and be refused, for instance, we're protected and that those trees should not actually be felled. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, so on the first question, the applicant was advised that they would need to go through the community asset transfer, which they were obviously in the process of doing at the time. We then advised that they would need to submit their variation, but that would be wholly dependent on comments from our ecologist. It wasn't a guarantee that the LPA would support removal of the trees. It was for them to demonstrate that there would be sort of no biodiversity loss and that they would demonstrate biodiversity net gain in accordance with the NPPF and local plan policies. As part of the application, we've obviously consulted with our ecologist on that, and they've objected to the loss of the trees because they consider that there will be a biodiversity loss on the site, which is, in this instance, why the application would therefore be recommended for a refusal. On the second point, in terms of minded to approve.
Yeah, Chair, on the second point, I mean, it wouldn't be the route that we would want to advise the applicant to go, because the minded to is sitting there for as long as it takes an application to come forward for the club facilities. Ideally, what we'd like is the club facilities application to come through in conjunction with the proposal to remove the trees as part of it, so that the two events are happening together. That's the ideal application that we're looking for. I feel, members, that there's a lot of, we've heard, really compelling presentations, Chair, from the sports club today and from the town council. And it's not that, I mean, I can't foresee or predict exactly what our ecologist would say, but we need the two things to come hand in hand together in one application to justify the biodiversity harm that's proposed in this application. I think from what we've heard from the speakers today, particularly the sports club speaker, it would seem to me that there's been some confusion about the communication on sequence of events, and we can certainly pick up a conversation of that, but ideally we need the justification for the sports club and to be able to consent the sports club to be able to demonstrate that and it goes back to the comment you raised, Councillor Hill, about being able to offset that harm, about the different gains that that the new proposal would give. At the minute, we're just looking at the loss of trees, and it is not connected with anything else, and that's the tension with this application, hence the reason for the recommendation. I hope that explains it, but I'm happy to take more questions along with Ryan.
Richard Dodd.
Yes, as some of you know, I've been banging the drum about ash dieback, and these are not ash dieback trees. However, in the scale of what is to come down in this county, 12 trees is not a huge amount, because I reckon there's 3 million trees to come down with ash dieback across the county. So on that, because these look quite healthy trees, there is another way. Has that been looked at? Because I was in a farmyard the other weekend, 2 weekends ago, and I saw a bit of equipment that actually digs those trees up and puts them somewhere else. Has that been invested? I know it might not be as cheap, but felling trees and replanting them is still not a cheap exercise these days. Has that been looked into? Because from the picture I saw, this machinery would get access to look at that, and the trees, we would end up with the same amount of mature trees just somewhere else. Has that been looked into?
Chair, I understand that it hasn't been looked into, and I'm not qualified to tell you about whether that would be successful or not today. We've got the comments that have come in. I think the other important point that I want to make on this application is, at the time when the original application came in to consider the new school and the new schools and the sports club there, we heard from the town council there was an awful lot of change to the biodiversity landscape there. So we did a lot to mitigate and secure, and part of that was the trees. And it's like any scheme that comes before you, trees are important and the biodiversity of our sites are important. So to come in without the right justification for the removal of these trees, it goes against what you secured at the time when we consented the schools and the leisure centres. So what we're saying is we need something a bit more. We need to tie the two events in together and see whether that's enough to offset the harm to the biodiversity on the site. And as part of that proposal, perhaps being able to lift up and replant those trees elsewhere may well gain points in the discussion with the ecologist, but that's not something that's been assessed to date. Councillor Dodd.
Ian Hutchinson.
On the back of what you said before regarding the application, I agree where the officers are coming from on this one, by the way. But you mentioned before that was the applicant actually approached in pre-app to say it would be best if you put an application in for a leisure centre and the trees at the same time? Or was it just accepted, we'll do whatever?
Yeah, so as part of the pre-application discussions back in December 2021, I believe, we obviously discussed the community asset transfer, which they were in the process of doing. And they were also advised that there was this restrictive condition attached to the whole leisure centre site that sort of did not allow any more sort of removal of any trees. What we did advise was that they would need to submit a variation to ultimately amend that condition to allow further removal of the trees, but that would be sort of wholly dependent on sort of comments from our ecologist. They initially submitted a full planning application, which was again objected to by our ecologist. That was withdrawn by the applicant. They then submitted this variation application, which is in consideration today, which again our ecologist was consulted on, and again they objected to the scheme. So yeah, I would sort of reiterate what sort of Liz would say, that I think ultimately what they're going to have to do is it would have to be a full planning application, and they would have to demonstrate additional biodiversity enhancement as part of that full planning application for us to then consider any removal of trees upon the site.
But in a nutshell, was it ever suggested that they should put full planning application in for a leisure clubhouse and removal of trees? In those words?
Throughout this application, yeah, that's been recommended to them, that they'll need to go down the full route. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome, Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. They've probably been answered, in a way, all the questions I had, but just to recap, let's say, this application is only about the trees, Ryan. We can't consider anything else because it's not on the table. All we're talking about is the removal of 12 trees.
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor.
Thank you. Now, if there was a new application, a substantive application come in about a clubhouse, could the removal of those 12 trees be included in that?
Yeah, so they could include the removal of the trees within that, but they would also then have to amend that condition at a later date to remove those trees as well. So they would need to submit a full planning application, and if a full planning application was supported by the local planning authority, they could then vary that condition at a later date.
Right. Well, my last question then is, who the hell told them to go down this route and put the application in to remove the trees before they put the application in for the clubhouse?
Yeah, well, as part of the pre-application inquiry, we advised them that they would need to vary this planning condition. But again, we advised that it was sort of wholly dependent on sort of our ecologist comments upon the application. And ultimately, Ecology have objected to the application, which is why, and Ecology are a statutory consultee on this, which is why we're recommending for refusal today.
Liz?
Chair, if it would help, it does appear that there's been the sequencing and the communication probably haven't been aligned on this, and whatever members decide this evening is up to them. But if you do decide to go with officer recommendation, what we can do is facilitate a meeting with the applicants, the ecologists, ourselves, and try and work out a route forwards to be able to take an application back to members.
Question from Guy Rowan-Thompson.
Thank you to the planning officer. My question was about the community asset transfer. So just to be sure, is the asset transfer dependent on this application, or are the two not linked?
No, as far as I'm aware, the community asset transfer has already been completed, but it's not relevant in terms of the planning application. That's between the applicant and sort of Northumberland County Council in that regard.
Another question from Julie Foster.
Thank you, Chair. So, my understanding would be that the applicant would need to now put in full planning permission for the clubhouse and the trees, but would then still have to go through this very situation again separately to vary the condition of the original application. Is there a way to link that so it's kind of done in one? Because it's kind of a big risk for a community organisation to put one application in to get that permission, but then something happens and this still falls, the 12 trees, and it's a considerable expense for a community to go to, a community asset to go to actually go for that permission. And given that, I hear what's being said about the order in which this is done and advice that's been given, but it does feel as if they've kind of been led down the path of doing this variation first, which obviously is going to have been at expense, for it to fall flat potentially with the likes of 7.12, that paragraph, to then have to go and have further costs for the planning application. It just feels really unfair on those for the clubhouse. It's the way it's actually gone. It's just, is there a way of linking it to put everything in together to that one application to sort of link that variation as well? I know I've never seen it before, but is it possible to actually do that?
Chair, yeah. So I think for the purposes of what's ahead or what lies ahead, the cleanest way is to make a decision on this evening, one way or the other. Then we go forward to the next steps. I can see that the application, if it's determined tonight, they can still get a free go on this application. So if you're concerned about planning fee costs and different things like that, we'll have an eye on that and be able to give the best advice to the clubs with regard to that. So I don't see that. I know you feel like this is additional burden for the club, but we can try and make it as smooth as possible and minimise situations where they run into cost or just trouble with trying to relaunch this application. What we'd far rather do is get this application determined. It's simpler, it's cleaner, start afresh, and then come back with this revised at a later date once we've got to the point that we're able to make a decision on it.
Georgina Hill.
Thank you. I'm just taking a step back. So you can tell the way we're all thinking about the benefit outweighing any harm, but I'm just going back to the condition that was originally attached to it. And it's not got a TPO and it's not within a conservation area. Just to clarify, so if I owned a field, a nice green field similar to this, didn't have a TPO, wasn't a conservation area, and there was 12, not absolutely spectacular, but nice enough trees, I could just cut those down without any permission whatsoever. No, I wouldn't.
No.
I just come back on that. So, yeah, you're right. Conservation area, TPOs, protect trees, but that's not the only protection. So on schemes like the School and Leisure Centre scheme, we would have had a landscaping and a biodiversity plan that all would have formed part of the approved plans of the scheme. So when we talk about landscaping here at committee, and there's trees, and sometimes members, you ask for additional trees, that's all protected through those approved plans and schemes. So if anything fails on that, we can say there's a breach of condition there and you've got to replant.
I'm just forgetting planning. I'm just saying if there was no TPO, there was nothing, there was no scheme, and I own this land, could I just go and cut those 12 trees down?
Yes, that's right. Apologies, I thought you meant on this site.
So,
But this site has got a planning consent with approved plans wanting to retain the scheme.
what I'm just getting at is sort of evaluating and what the, we're just looking at the tree, but it hasn't got tree protection of. The only reason it is because of a condition with another planning application. So what we're asking to do is that, does it make sense to remove this condition, given all factors into consideration? And that's what's give me another angle to think why we can do this.
Could I just come back on that
Yes,
point?
of course.
And I think this is what's really important is, when we're negotiating on schemes coming forward, members, there's so much work goes into, landscaping, tree planting, the biodiversity on the site, and we have a lot of duties and responsibilities under our planning policy and national planning policy. So to decide to vary it, you've got to be really clear about have you met that test? Those conditions are very important, and we've gone to appeal. It's like people wanting to extend their gardens onto open space that we've protected on housing developments and so forth. They're all really important and integral to sites.
Could we just attach this permission to these applicants? If that makes sense. So they could remove the tree. Because we are looking at these community clubs rather than some housing developer, which, we could say, because we know what their plans are. And we're not just giving anyone carte blanche, we're giving them ability to get rid of the trees.
I'm not sure. It's quite a nice idea, a novel idea. Looking to Joe, our lawyer, I think it would have to be, I don't know if you can do a personal position it would probably be to the sports club. It's not to a particular person. I realise there's a named applicant here that's taken this forward, but the permission would be personal to them, and I think really what you want is to give it to the combined clubs. I'm not sure.
Any advice?
Straightforward.
No, because regardless, the permission still has a condition that these trees are protected and aren't to be removed, and there's nothing forthcoming in respect of why they're being removed, so we're in the same position whether it was personal or to this applicant.
Malcolm, have you got another question?
Yeah, just a couple of quick ones. Given that if a substantive application came in for a clubhouse, it would include these trees, and we've conditioned them. So if the refusal stands tonight, I presume that application would come in front of this committee.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's very likely that it would. I'd just have to test it against the our delegation scheme. But yes, I mean, we could make a note to say that it's got to come back to this committee, members.
I think it should. And I sat on the original committee that gave the permission, and I know how much work went into the biodiversity, the hedgerows and the trees, and we insisted we save as many as possible on that development, and these 12 are part of that amount we saved. When we talk about the 12 trees that we've just heard about, it isn't just 12 trees, that condition. It's about the whole treatment of the surviving vegetation, the hedgerows and the trees. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's correct, Chair.
Julie, another question?
Thanks, Chair. This is a variation of a condition. So I know it says an additional condition upon this permission could not be included, but could something not be written into the variation of this condition that the trees could only be felled if permission was granted upon the successful planning application that could come forward? So given that it's a variation, we're not adding a new condition, we're varying the condition already by the request to remove those trees. Can we not vary that condition to say on the basis of whatever, say 2-for-1 planting for replacement for the biodiversity, and that no trees can be removed until a successful planning application has gone through for the clubhouse? So if that application fell further down the line, that condition's basically saying, well, you can't remove the trees because that application wasn't successful. Is that a possibility?
We might hear from our lawyer in a moment, but if you decide to vary the condition to go ahead with the removal of the trees, I understand that it's subject to another external outside event happening. You're creating a legitimate expectation that the trees are going to be removed, and it wouldn't be a way that we would advise that you go about planning, and we know that there's case law on that on that point as well. So it wouldn't be a way forward. Plus, I think what Joe wants to say, it's not reasonable proportionate to what we're looking at here. But you're granting a consent based on an unknown event that may never happen. I know there's a very strong impression and will here today in the chamber that it's going to happen, but we see this day in, day out in our jobs, and actually it doesn't happen until the day the application comes in and it gets the consent.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Wallace. You have a question?
Thanks, Chair. Chair, I've sat on planning for a long time now, and one of the things we were taught at the very beginning is you deal with the application that's in front of you. Unfortunately, in this one, we can see, what could potentially happen and the benefits that hundreds of individuals would gain from, but we must look at what's in front of us, and this is really guiding us into looking at this application to deal with the variation, whether it should happen or whether it shouldn't. But what you did say was, you should be more than prepared to sit with the applicants and the ecologist. Now, the applicant has stated he hasn't been able to meet with the ecologist. There could be very, very good reasons, but I'm confident had the ecologist been sat at this table tonight, there could have been questions. For example, I thought Councillor Dodd's point about the trees is something I've never come across before,
was extremely valid, and I'd like to know more about that. So if that, could we as a committee, should we be mindful to refuse this, but can we have some sort of condition that says, yes, it's on condition, the officers, planning officers, you determine which ones, and the applicant, they determine which ones, and the ecologist sit around a table to take this forward in a sensible, and come to a sensible solution. And why do we want a sensible solution? For the benefit of hundreds of people. And that's what we are about, Chair. Thank you.
Fine. We've got to be careful, ladies and gentlemen, that, you know, we're not debating the application here. We're just asking the questions, but I do understand your question. It's trying to, you know, forge a way forward on this one. I think, you know, we've had a good question and answer session, ladies and gentlemen. You know, we've got a condition here that we've attached to a former application, which is important in terms of trees and hedgerows, especially as so many trees were taken down when the leisure centre was constructed. But, you know, what our planning officers are telling us today is we've got an application to vary that condition, but really, as a planning committee, we haven't got the substantive reasons to approve it. And that's what we need. We need those important planning reasons to alter a condition. And, you know, the powers that be are saying that, you know, the application is there, but unfortunately what's behind the application, there is no planning application at the moment. We all have great sympathy with Ponteland Town Council, we do, but what should really happen today is what our planning officers are advising. We've got an application to vary condition without the reason to vary it. Julie.
Thank you, Chair.
Are you going to make a proposal?
Yeah, with a heavy heart. I'm going to move that we go with the officer recommendation. I have asked a number of quite probing questions about if there are ways that we can look at this differently, and they have been comprehensively answered, and I understand the reasons why. Thank you for clarifying those. I think we all want to see sports facilities for young people and older people to keep people fit, you know, but we also have to balance it with the biodiversity, the benefit that trees do bring, especially given that we're having these heavier rainfalls and what trees do to help soak up that water. And it is a balancing act there. And I agree that there's just not enough in this to outweigh the harm. There may be in a future application, we wait to see that, it may well happen. Obviously we don't know till we see it and we debate it, but I think on this occasion, unfortunately, we'll have to refuse planning permission and encourage the applicant to work with planning to bring something forward to see where that goes, Chair. Thank you.
Is that seconded? Councillor Hutchinson seconding the application?
I'll second that. I think that's also been a summing up.
Well, not quite. Anybody else want to speak to the application? Lyle?
Thank you, Chair. Just a point to say that the committee's decided to take that view. I think we've heard from the Chamber that we all want to support this application. The applicant has unfortunately been led down this path where they come to this Chamber for variation without the full application. So I feel that we are discussing the application here. We know that no tree would be felled if and until they get planning permission. We are having that discussion here. We know there's going to be a net biodiversity gain on site. There is no reason to fell any tree on site if and until they get planning permission. They have been given ill advice, it seems, sort of thing, to bring this application here today without a full application. However, we have that application in front of us today. They are not going to go away tomorrow and fell down some trees, 12 trees, if and until they get planning permission. So we are here today discussing this application. There is a net biodiversity gain on site, and they can't get planning permission if and until this variation is enacted upon. So we are just, I know what members are saying, they have this variation to them today, but in us granting permission, we are still saying that they will not fell any trees if and until they get permission for the planning. I know members have said you've got to take what's in front of them, but there is a bigger picture at stake here. They have been guided to this chamber today for this plan, for this variation, and we should look at what the application we have in the bigger picture. We know there's going to be a net biodiversity gain on site, and they're not going to build on that site if and until they get plan permission. So I feel like we should give them this application today. We know the planning application will come back, as members have already alluded to that. So when it comes back, we can say that they still got to plant 2-for-1 trees if we grant this today. So they've got to increase the net biodiversity again. The actual plan permission for these new sports facilities will come back to this committee where we can add various things to it as well. So I just feel that we have let the applicant down if we do refuse this permission today. And I feel that we should be granting this application because we are having a discussion now, and they shouldn't need to come back for us to then debate this again when we are going to debate the main application at a later stage. So I can't support this officer's recommendation, although I do see why they've come to that recommendation. But I think we should be allowing them to go ahead with this.
Richard Dodd?
Yeah. We all want decent facilities, and we all want, in any other sphere, we would be promoting the use of sport, facilities, etc. We obviously do as a county try and get as many people involved. And here we have a voluntary organisation trying to do that to the best of, like any other little town would want to do. However, we have this problem, the chicken or the egg, what came first? I think this might, I can't read the room, but I would like to think that this is an opportunity for the residents of Mayfair Gardens and Ferny Edge to possibly talk to the rugby club if, and I know I'm not going if, there is machinery that scoop those trees up on the back of a tractor or something bigger. They dig out a hole the size of a huge bath and they dig one somewhere else and it just pops it into that. And they are the right size of trees to do that. And if I was a resident of that Ferny Edge who want to protect the barrier that creates, they should talk to the rugby club, because there will be another application comes down the line, and say, could we strengthen that barrier, that line of trees, and you will get more biodiversity than you had. And, that there is an opportunity that should not be missed. But also, I need to recognise that, we don't want to be in the way of progress. Ponteelan probably has more trees per head than any other town. Although for some, it is, every tree is sacred. I even had a woman on the phone once when they took the big tree that was diseased next to the Peel Tower. She was in floods of tears. She even said, this is worse than when she lost her mother and father. So it is an issue. And I'm saying it is an issue. It's not just here at Ferny Edge, it's everywhere you go. There's, you can't do that because of the trees. But this is about progress. I don't want to stand in the way in progress. And I believe that from what we've heard, there will be another application that follows this and where there's an opportunity. And there's a little bit of time for people to strengthen that barrier. Remember, I used to chair a committee that was trying with all the sports clubs, etc., to make the leisure centre a better place to be, which included the residents there, because they were upset about the traffic and the parking that used to take place there, especially on the weekend. That problem has gone, but obviously there's no entrance going in there from what I've seen or heard. So there is an opportunity, and I don't want to waste that opportunity. I'll leave it in other people's hands.
Thank you. Gavin Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It's one of those applications where both sides are right. The council planning officers are technically correct in their appraisal, because there isn't the second application to come with it. But then the whole point of planning committee is for councillors to use their local knowledge and experience to add some different angles on this thing. And with my experience in my own patch of community asset transfers and trying to develop facilities, if the land has a variation, has a condition on like this, it just makes life harder. It makes it harder to submit grant application forms, go to bodies like the FA, if you went to a grant application body to get some money to then do the second big planning application, the first thing they'd say is, well, you've got these trees are protected, so we're not going to give you any money. So this may be the case that removing the trees is actually the first stage, and then you move on to the second stage where you go out for grant funding to do the second stage. So while I recognise that the officers are technically correct, I wouldn't want to stand in the way of any future project. So I think we should be allowing the removal of the variation.
Barry Fluggs.
I'll keep it short and sweet. I haven't got the 100%. I'm probably 99.99% certain you'll put another application in, but I can't say with 100% that people will. I mean, in my 40 years on this planet, I've watched lots of local sports teams sadly disappear overnight. I'm not suggesting it will happen, but without that 100% surety that we've got the other application, I don't think I can support this, I'm afraid. I want to see it happen, but I don't think I can support it.
Thank you. Georgina Hill.
Thank you, Chair. It's very frustrating, isn't it? Because at times you sit in planning and you see what I would call the strategic tactics used by applicants. You know, the classic one is the outline permission. Oh, just agree to it as only outline, and then when you get the detail, well, you can't object because they've got outline and all the weird and wonderful and what the consultants advise them how to get around things. It's really frustrating when you've got something that's clearly good community benefit and they're being frustrated by the timescale when they brought this through in good faith. I mean, leaving aside the obvious benefits of this proposal, and I read today how there's leisure facilities elsewhere in the country that have been closed down because of COT, and we're very lucky what we have in Northumberland, which should be something we promote. But leaving that aside, I'm just on the strength of the condition itself. And for me, even that on alone, leaving aside everything else, the condition of taking down trees and replacing them is enough for me. So I can't support the officer recommendation on this occasion.
Councillor Swinburne.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is actually quite simple because it's quite technical. I think more or less we're all agreed that cutting down trees should be a last resort. And whilst obviously we have, I think, trying to read the room, great sympathy for what sporting clubs are trying to do, and all of us would like that sort of thing to be happening in our own wards. As I say, this is very technical. This is coming down to, do we allow these trees to be cut down now? I have in my ward in Alnwick, a kind of similar but slightly different situation happened where an applicant needed to put in a little cycle path, just a short cycle path to facilitate their development. They put in their plan and said we need to take out these 2 trees. This is on the entrance to Alnwick, probably 30-year-old trees. And they said we've got to chop these 2 trees down because we can't get in otherwise to do this. So they duly cut the trees down. They got in with a digger and found that there's a water main underneath, and they couldn't actually put the cycle path where they needed to put it. So they actually moved it further to the south and put it between 2 trees which were still there. So we're now in a situation where we've got our cycle path and we've lost 2 trees which we can't grow back because it's going to take 30, possibly longer years to grow them back. The point about this application is that it prevents those trees being cut down, or indeed, as Councillor Dodd said, which is a very good point, and I'm not sure on the technicality of it, until they are removed, until the very, very last minute. Lots of things could happen before this application comes in. I think, councillors would be supportive of an application should it come in for the full thing, so it can all be discussed. Highways and everything else would need to be discussed. But at this point in time, I can't support this application because it may be that these trees ultimately will not need to be cut down. There is a small chance of that.
Thank you. Ian Hutchinson, anything? No. Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add my tuppence worth, I think we need to be very careful. I think we've got a clear obligation tonight to support the officer's recommendation. If you look at the description of the proposals, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, there's no biodiversity mentioned. There's no tree root ball removal, change in place. There's nothing mentioned. You can't make this decision based on wish lists. Certainly not our wish lists. What's in front of us, as Councillor Wallace said, is the only thing we can consider. Now, having said that, at previous committees, I've heard us suggest, make a strong suggestion, that the applicant comes back with a different type of application. And I think we'd all be supportive of that. That's why I asked to make sure this committee gets any future application. So that would be my position. Thank you.
As Chair, you know, I urge the members of the Planning Committee to stick by the officer recommendation, to follow planning policy as good planners. There's got to be a reason to cut down trees and remove hedgerows. We haven't got a reason in front of us today. At some later date, we might get another application which does have that information. You know, as Councillor Hill has said, you know, this possibly has great community benefit in the future. When that application with community benefit comes forward, you know, that is the time for us to consider altering the tree condition, not now when we haven't got that information before us. Julie, would you like to sum up, please, this difficult debate?
I think, as Councillor Hutchinson said, I kind of probably summed it up when I did the proposal. So I think the comments that I made then pretty much stand, Chair. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an application before us today to refuse altering the condition 22, which relates to hedgerows and trees. All those in favour of supporting...
Chair, can I just come in before we go to the vote? It was mentioned before...
No, we've summed up now, so we have to...
But can I just clarify what was mentioned before, once I can make a decision on the vote? It was mentioned that if we go with the officer's recommendation, that the planning department would work closely with the applicant. Is that still in place?
Well, I'm sure they will.
But
Yeah.
that is going to be...
No, it is. That's the way to go forward, for them to work closely with the applicant. So that's an application, a motion to refuse altering this condition, which relates to hedgerows and trees, and put forward by Councillor Judy Foster, seconded by Ian Hutchinson. All those in favour, would you please raise your hands? Those against? That application to refuse. Sorry?
Abstentions?
Any abstentions? Oh, 2, sorry. That application today is refused. Thank you. Difficult one, ladies and gentlemen, but I think we have taken the right decision. So, it's all right, he has to leave early, yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen of the committee, item number 7. Liz, we're going to continue, sorry. Yes. Can we? Yes. Yeah. Item number 7 is information on appeals, an update on appeals, pages 27 to 38. We've got item number 8, which is section 106 agreements update reports, 39 to 42. And the chair has no urgent business.